You've seen COMTO grow in the last
Yes.
few years, haven't you?
Yes,
Talk
definitely.
to me about that.
I've seen it grown, and I think a natural progression that any organization needs, and the changes that they need to make to be relevant and viable, particularly what's happening in terms of reaching out to individuals that are not familiar,
Right.
the youth, and trying to attract them to look at our industry as a place to advance and develop a great career. And so, you know, I think where a great deal of focus in the very beginning was developing and creating opportunities for the members.
Right.
Now we're looking at how we can be more relevant in the far future by creating that pipeline of young folks coming into this industry.
In Atlanta,
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
In Atlanta, you got to see all of the city interns and the
Yes,
scholars and
yes.
emerging leaders. In fact, at lunch, you got a chance to speak to them.
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, I think at this stage, in terms of my career and development, having led all these organizations, it gives me an opportunity to give back. And it may be just a couple of minutes, but I enjoy that conversation more than any other conversation I have in terms of my workload. And so it's my opportunity to just impart, if it's just one person in that room that grabs something from that conversation and inspires them or encourages them to strive a little harder, to have a little insight, and be the next Nat Ford of the world in our industry.
Well, you know that we're putting more and more emphasis on youth, and having you and other senior leaders in the same room at the same time.
Oh, yes.
And having young people be able to hear your voice and then look and see General George Bowman or Bev Scott all in the same room.
Yeah,
that's golden. You
golden.
can't do that any place but COMTO.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so you're by default, you're part of our whole academic structure, man. So thank you so much for doing that. Let's talk about interns here in Jacksonville this year.
Yes.
I know you want to have some.
That's right. So immediately after Atlanta, you know, I came to you and said, "Look, well, where are my interns?" And you know, again, as a father of four and raising young people, it's important that we just give them all that we can. And so I'm looking for that opportunity to have some interns here in Jacksonville and give them our best.
Are you going to give them some time with you as part of their 10 weeks here?
Yes, you know, I've had interns for different programs. In fact, we had interns from the city of Jacksonville this past year, and I've always made it a point that they're not sitting working in the copier room or running to get coffee and things of that nature. They're in the midst of things. So they're sitting in staff meetings. They're sitting next to me and seeing what my day looks like. So I carve out that time to make that happen. And so we're not just creating an environment for someone to come in and, like I said, do low-level work, menial work.
If you had 2 or 3 interns, where would you place them?
I think clearly I would want them in our finance and administration area, really looking at how we run the business from a financial standpoint.
So you're looking for a business major then?
I'm looking for a business major in that particular case. I'm looking for long-range planning and strategic planning. So I would look for an intern to work in that particular area as it relates to where the city of Jacksonville and Northeast Florida is going into the future, and for them to be part of developing the plans that'll be in place, implemented the next 5, 10, 15 years. I would also look at someone who would work in my space, the forward-facing government relations, community relations area, and how marketing and media and positioning the organization to be relevant to not just our transit riders, but relevant to folks who support it and don't ride the system, business leaders. Taxpayers who, who may not use transit, but we may need to make it relevant for them to continue to support it.
Now you mentioned earlier that even here in Jacksonville, you're starting to expand out further and further to a regional concept. Is that?
Yes.
So do you see the interns and the emerging leaders being part of that growth over time?
Definitely. There is going to be a need for transportation professionals in this community, and we are at this point medium-sized transit system in terms of scale, but the regional transportation concept is already under discussion. We have started providing service in some of the outer counties and are in discussions with them, but it's going to need to be knitted together into a large Northeast Florida regional transportation network. With that, we will need talented individuals.
So you want to grow your own, is what you're saying, right?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. Let's Let me ask you a question about your time with ABDE.
Yes.
You've been there for quite a while. Compare ABDE and COMTO and their missions.
Yes. And very similar, but there are some distinctions. And I think, ABDE has its role and it's doing a lot of the same work that COMTO is doing, but on a much broader scale, looking at the entire policy making framework in terms of our funding bill at the federal level, involving all of the businesses as well as agencies around the country. So they have that role, being the voice for transportation, the major advocate and collection point for all perspectives as it relates to transportation. COMTO has a unique, it has all of that plus a unique charge, which is to ensure that minorities, people of color, have the ability to participate in that and have an active role in that and have their skills, again, developed and honed to be an active participant at the grander level. And at this point, I think COMTO is evolved to be exactly a peer in some ways of ABDE.
So it's a good partnership.
It's an extremely well thought out and good partnership. Again, in the very beginnings, it was about making sure that we weren't just sitting, driving the bus or operating in a train.
But in the boardroom.
But we were in the boardroom, we were in the C-suite, and making sure that we were prepared for those opportunities. And a venue was created that you could clearly see who those individuals are. Now, I think there's a bit of a transition, which is continuing that pipeline, and more importantly, doing some of the advocacy work in our communities.
Right, outreach.
And outreach in our communities and making sure we're relevant.
When COMTO first started, it was mostly transit focused, and over the years, you've seen it go to become more multimodal. Even here, I know you and Chairman Bob Prince have talked about reaching out to the ports. In fact, you have a young lady here who's helping Bob. She's on the board. Aisha Eccleston is helping. She's working with you to bring more ports into COMTO, is that right?
Yes, exactly. So we're working very closely with her. When I arrived here at the JTA, there was, and that has been historic, there was a focus on the JTA. We are the large public transit provider here, and we began, much in line with the national office, began the efforts to bring the port in, to bring the airport in. And I was happy to see her at our conference and being an active participant in our conference and seeing that some of the folks that we deal with in terms of public transit are the same individuals and organizations that are trying to do business and work with the ports. And there is, I think, a need for greater development in those other areas.
Well, not just ports. As I came in from the airport, we came across the bridge, the name of the bridge, the
Dames Point?
And that's a federal highways funded project.
That's right.
So your portfolio crosses most of DOT.
Yes, the JTA, in addition to our public transportation, public transit responsibilities, are also responsible for building bridges and roads here in Duval County. And the Dames Point Bridge is an iconic bridge that the JTA built some years ago that has gotten world renowned in terms of its design and its purpose. And so we have in our portfolio not just the public transit element, we have the roads element. And so if you came to the JTA, you're going to learn all about transportation. And frankly, in terms of Jacksonville in general, one of the names or one of the acronyms for Jacksonville is logistics capital of the U.S. because we have the port, we have CSX here, and so strong freight railroad corporations.
So it all kind of like Union Station all comes together.
It all comes together here, and a pretty robust public transportation system. So you can actually bring a container into Jacksonville and pretty much within 24 hours get it almost to the West Coast. Jacksonville is much further west than people imagine, and with the container coming in, loading it either onto a truck. We have a very robust highway system. That's part of the JTA's responsibilities, came out of the need for an expressway authority back in the 50s to make sure that the port and residents had great access to the interstate highway system. And with that, you now have I-75, 95, and I-10. I-10 runs all the way from the East Coast straight across the nation. And so there is, beyond the JTA, for COMTO members and COMTO in general, this is where it all knits together. Freight railroad, public transportation, the port, trucking, logistics and
all
trucking,
ties together.
and our airport.
And what it takes to make all that move.
Exactly.
So COMTO's moving the nation is
Right in line.
apropos.
It's right in line.